folks, so hello to another Wednesday. I'm actually recording on Tuesday for a change, so I should get this one out in time. And today I've decided to record on the Sony ZV-1. No idea what it's going to turn out like. Sony's prefer green cast to them, so I will try and edit that out. Anyway, I digress. What are we going to talk about today? Well, I hinted last week that Fuji had officially announced a new camera, but there were rumours, courtesy of Fuji rumours, that they're releasing a new camera, and there's a new rumour being released, which has indicated what the camera was. And I've got some notes on my phone here, so I'm going to sort of go through these. But I was wrong, and I think a lot of people who were guessing were wrong. It's quite a surprise. So Fuji released a rangefinder style camera called the XE series. I started with the XE1 about 10 years ago. This camera though was basically like an XT30, XT20, XT10 with the viewfinder, but it didn't have the bump on the top. So if we look at my XS20 here, it's got a bump on the top for the viewfinder. It's a traditional camera shape. If there is a shape for a traditional camera, a traditional SLR camera shape. The hump used to be for the prism in film cameras. I've got my film camera. Oh, it was on that side of me. Not that side. That side. That's my film camera. You can see the hump on it. But that was for the prism, which sent the light to your eye, so you could see what the camera was seeing, see through the lens. Hence the name single lens reflex camera. It was the first camera or type of camera, I believe, other than rangefinders, whereas a rangefinder camera traditionally had an optical viewfinder that was to one side. So those who've been big fans of the X100 series, that had an optical viewfinder that kind of just was offset. You could actually see the lens through it. And before we had SLRs, we had rangefinders, and Sony brought out a range of rangefinders. Rangefinders. No pun intended. And it was the XE series. They did have other ones. The other cameras that they had were a series called the XA. And these, I think, a lot of these were released before they became popular with the X series. Because I remember looking at Fuji cameras, and when I was starting to get interested in switching from Canon to Fuji, and they hadn't yet released the first X series camera, but they did have. You could see it was coming from what they'd been sort of designing their prior cameras, and I forget what the models were. What the model names. I'll have to look some up. If I can find one, I will pop it on the screen now. But if I don't, I won't. Anyway, what's the camera that they're going to be rumoured to releasing? Well, there was a camera that was released around about the same time as the XE1, XE2, called the XM1. Now, the XM1 actually, funnily enough, was a bit like the XS20 that I've got here. So what's special about the XS20? Well, the XS20 is the only X-Trans 5 processor camera that has an X-Trans 4 sensor, imaging sensor. So it's got the older technology coupled with the newer processor. And if I just look on the notes here, I think it was saying that it's the same. So they released a camera which basically had the X-Trans 1 sensor, which is a very desirable sensor actually. People really like the look that sensor can give. So that's why a lot of people like to go after these older vintage cameras, vintage style ones. So it has that sensor, but it had the X-Trans 2 processor, so obviously it had all the advantages of the newer cameras, and I think the X-Trans 2 processor was in the likes of the XT. It would have been in the XT2, I think, and the I'm not sure about the XT10, and probably the XT20. Yes, because the XT30 would have been the first one to have the X-Trans 3 sensor, or the XT3. They tended to follow the numbering, apart from these two quirky cameras. The XS20 is the first of its kind. It's a new camera that came out a couple of years ago. The XS10, which I did used to own one, it's like a baby XH2. They're tiny. They're really, really small cameras, but uber portable, really lovely deep grip on them, and lovely little cameras. They're just not weather resistant, and we'll come on to that when we'll go into a bit more detail about the XM1. So, XM1, who's it for? Well, when Fuji released the XM1, they said it was an enthusiast camera. So that would put it in the same realms as X100V, an enthusiast camera. And it's proven very popular, that camera. It was puzzling why they didn't bring an XE5 out, though. But the XE4, for some reason, was never a popular camera. Don't know why, it just wasn't. But would it have been today? Because it never had a chance, but it never really got picked up. I quite like the rangefinder style of them because they're compact, and if I could get a camera more compact than the XS20, then I would. I would get something a bit more compact. It would be great to have that thing. Something that's, I mean, the ZV-1's a great camera, but God, I've spent the last hour fiddling around setting it up. It's a faff to set up because the touchscreen isn't touch sensitive like my Lumix. It's great. Everything is touchscreen. Boop, 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 touch on the screen. Just put settings on or use really intuitive menus on my Lumix. That's fine. Not a problem. Sony, you can touch the autofocus point. That's it. The touchscreen's nothing else is touchscreen, and it's all done by a fiddly little menu. And even that menu isn't touchscreen. It could be, so you've got to do everything with tiny little menus and repurpose buttons. So one of the reasons I'm not so keen on the Fuji, and the fact that although it's got a shuttered guard, the front lens on these cameras I feel is quite delicate. But I do love it as a camera. It's super compact for running. But if we could get something basically this size, and it'll be smaller, you're probably talking about the same thickness as this, but minus the grip, and a bit, probably not quite as wide. You can imagine that it's going to be in the realms of Micro Four Thirds cameras, but APS-C size. And I really hope Fuji, if they do release this camera, make it really small. But equally, I hope it's going to be feature packed. It's going to have to come in probably under the XT5, under the XS20, under the X100V in pricing. So my guess would be around about an £800 camera, maybe £1,000. And I think for that, I would still expect quite a lot. And I really, really, really hope, because it was one of the most frustrating things on this camera, that they first of all make it weather resistant. Because the assumption is that I don't think weather resistance adds that much to the cost. Maybe it does. I don't know. I don't think it will. Mobile phones are weather resistant. They're expensive items. If a mobile phone costs £1,000 and it's weather resistant, surely a camera that's £1,000 can also be weather resistant. And enthusiasts or novices alike who may be interested in a camera like this probably would want to use it in the rain. So they'd use their phone in the rain. So I really, really hope it's weather resistant. I really do. But that aside, that caveat aside, one of the main omissions is that the XM1 never had a viewfinder. So if the new whatever they release could be an XM5, I don't know, That's the touted name. So let's call it an XM5 for now. If that's released and it doesn't have a viewfinder, then it's going to have a high-res screen, something like the XA7 screen, which was 2.7 million pixels, maybe even higher-res screen, and maybe the screen can be really big on the back, and so that it's like, 3.5 inches or something. So it literally is designed to fill the back of the camera with a very narrow bezel, so that it's like as intuitive as a mobile phone almost. Really big touchscreen, and it's got a really good and new touch interface, where Fuji have moved away from their old X-Trans sensor, though it's still got lots of details, but it's more focused around touchscreen navigation. We don't know. Hopefully it'll have a joystick on the back. Hopefully we'll have dials. I would love to see them include a good amount of vintage dials and not go, well, it's not a premium camera, so it doesn't get the dials. Because if they put the dials on that the XT5 had, that will be great, because obviously the XM1, XE4 were more vintage-esque. They weren't like the XA series, which had PASM dials on. Because they're quite tactile to use, and they're enjoyable to use for most people. But we speculated on what it could be, and now you know what it is. I would like you to, again, another game, if you like, speculate on what it might be. Are you disappointed? Comment below that it's a rangefinder style camera that has interchangeable lenses. See, I was a bit concerned that being a rangefinder with interchangeable lenses, that it might not appeal. I thought a compact camera would be more appealing to folks. Is it? I don't know. From what we've seen so far, people, the people who are buying these type of cameras want a fixed lens. So will they buy this camera when it doesn't have a fixed lens? It really depends how Fuji market it. In a sense, they're copying what Lumix did with the S9, which is a no-frills, retro-ish style rangefinder full-frame camera. Except Fuji have a bit of a heritage in this, as it were. I don't think Lumix quite have the heritage that Fuji have. So in essence, it could be quite an interesting camera. I think some Fuji enthusiasts will be interested. I think a lot were disappointed that it wasn't an XE series, because they want the viewfinder. But if you don't have a viewfinder, you could potentially have much more of a touchscreen interface. You could take up the whole back of the camera, potentially with a touchscreen. As long as you've still got some dials on the top, some tactile dials to do the shutter and the aperture, I think you could get away with giving over virtually the whole back of the screen to touchscreen interface. And maybe that's what they're going to go for. What would you rather have? Would you rather have a small? And I think also it should have a flippy screen, because I think the people who are going to be buying it are the kind who want to do selfies. Now, the XM1 did have quite good video capabilities in its day, 1080p. I think it did 25p. I don't know. We can check on here to see what the video capabilities were, if they've got them on there. And of course, it's going to take all your X-Trans sensor X-mount lenses, which I think is really good as well. And you can put the TT Artisan's 27mm lens would fit on there, as well as a cheap pancake lens. About time Fuji released their own version of that, of course. Then the notes I've got here, I haven't got the video thing, but I remember reading that it did 1080p video, the old one, so I would imagine the new one's going to do at least 4K, and probably 4K 60, because if the S20 can do 4K 60, then I would hope this could. It's a more compact body, so there might be time restrictions for it. 240p, which is like 10 times slowdown. 1080p, I probably think it'll probably get that because I think it'll have an X-Trans 5 processor. The question is, which sensor will it have, lastly? Will they pair it with the older 26 megapixel sensor? Or will they pair it with the new 40 megapixel? Or will they do something really weird and different? And maybe make it 16 megapixel? And I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. Imagine if they stuck an X-Trans 1 sensor in there. I think it was 16 megapixels. You know, the camera would then plainly be aimed at, you know, holiday makers and some enthusiasts who want to take a half-decent camera. I don't think that would necessarily be a great idea. I can see how it would appeal to some people who can't get a hold of the old vintage camera, and that might add some appeal. But 16 megapixel does, to an extent, limit what you can do with the pictures. But then some mobile phones are only 12 megapixels, so you never know. I kind of like to see it be 26. In an ideal world, I'd love to see the 26 megapixel X-Trans 5 sensor in there, the stacked one. Now it's been out a couple of years. Maybe it's cheap enough to put that in. I think that would be incredible if they put that sensor in it, because it would seem like a waste, though. And I think a lot of people watching me might think, yeah, mad, thinking they should put that in there. But it would make for a good video camera, because video is becoming ever more popular. And if you've got something that's really good at video, all right, I'm sure they would nobble it so that it didn't do the high frame rates that the XH2S does. You know, it might be, and of course it'll probably have severely restricted recording times because it's a small body and the heat build-up. And it probably won't support the fan attachment, I would have thought. But with a flip screen, they could do that. Would be an interesting option, because the fan, this camera supports a fan attachment because it can overheat. Because it's a small body, it's more likely to overheat. So it's food for thought, really. There's so much it could be that could make it an exciting camera. So really, that's kind of what I wanted to bring you today. I wanted to sort of speculate on what this camera could be. Am I excited about it? Yeah, I guess I am in a way, because I bought the XA7 and I did like that format, but its autofocus was dreadful, and the touch interface was, it improved. They did bring out a new interface which was better, but it wasn't perfect. It wasn't there. And I think if they could get a really big screen on this, and it's a flip screen, and they give it, you know, external mic ability, it's got to have the ability to have an external mic on it. I think it needs to have good video capabilities. Maybe even if it's going to be £1,000, have that stacked sensor in it, or a new, maybe semi-stacked sensor. Thinking the Nikon Z6 III, which has got this semi. Maybe they've brought out a cheaper version of the 26 megapixel semi-stacked sensor. That would be great. And I think it could be a really neat little camera, because I would jump at the chance of having a camera that could do everything, and I could take my lenses with me, but it's small and compact, and it needs to take the new battery. I think it was a mistake, Fuji, not putting the MPW235. This is a small rig copy of one. It charges itself, actually. I think they made a mistake not putting that camera in. It's whether they can fit that camera into the body. I hope they can, because then it would have really, really super battery life. Plus, I've sold all my 126 batteries. They were dreadful. The battery life was dreadful on the older batteries, and one of I couldn't understand when they did the X100V when they put that battery in. It probably won't have that battery, but we can hope. But if it came out and had, let's summarise to finish off. It needs to have the bigger battery, I hope. It needs to have a 26 megapixel semi-stacked sensor. That would be great. A new sensor, or a sort of cut down version of it, or possibly just the stacked sensor if it can come out. But I'd prefer it I wouldn't want it to have the 40 megapixel sensor. If it couldn't have the 40 megapixel sensor, give it the X-Trans 4 sensor, because the combo you get with this is great. It really is. It was a great combo, and they might do that to save, but keep the cost down. So I think 26 megapixels would be the sweet spot. I'm really excited to see what sensor it has. I'd like to see a big touchscreen on the back that flips out. I'd like to see connectivity options for flash, though, still. Although it may not have it, but I hope it does. Because I'd still like to be able to use a little camera like that with a flash on. I don't think Fuji are as foolhardy as Panasonic on the lack of flash, though. And I do hope it has a magnetic shutter. Not a magnetic shutter. A mechanical shutter. I do hope it has a mechanical shutter and not an electronic one. The only exception to that would be if they do put a stacked sensor in and then they take the shutter mechanism out. That could work, because the stacked sensor at the XH2S is very good. It's very fast readout, and it could work. The problem with the S9 is they took the shutter out, and then they put like a standard, really slow readout. Well, the S5 2X and the S5 II have quite slow sensor readouts. They're not, worst in class, but they're not fast, and you get this thing called rolling shutter. So that if they took the shutter out, it makes the camera smaller, cheaper to build, but you have to have a fast readout on the camera sensor, and the stacked sensor could do that, and taking that out could save the money. So there's so many, and a lot of people have written this camera off saying, I'm not buying it, it's not what I want. It quite excites me to have something like this, because I've always wanted an uber compact Fuji style camera that does it all, and this one could. I could put a small lens on it and it's going to be almost pocketable. And if it has a flip screen and it's got a touch interface, I don't mind the lack of a viewfinder. I can put my glasses on. I've got a touch interface that I'm familiar with on mobile phones. Great. So we've got the touchscreen, we've got the sensor, we've got the desirability for a mechanical shutter and a hot shoe for flash, not a cold shoe, a mic jack. It's probably X-Trans 5, 26 megapixels. It takes obviously it's interchangeable lenses, so not a problem there. And of course, it has to come in black and silver. Definitely needs to, not a black version, black and silver, and different coloured ones if you want. It'll definitely, I'm sure it will come in different colours. And I can't think of anything else of what I would put in there. Maybe an accessory for a fan. Maybe an accessory for a plug-in electronic viewfinder, for a high-res one or something. A 3.6 million electronic viewfinder as an accessory would be nice to have. I think that could possibly be a good thing, whether it would be bought or not. But who does this camera appeal to? You see, it's appealing to me, and I don't know if it'll appeal to others. Anyway, I think I've said enough about the camera. I think it's over to you guys to have a chat in the comments below and see what you think. Would you buy this camera? Remember, I'm speculating. I've speculated on what it is. This is not what the camera could be. All we know is it's based on the Fujifilm XM1. Look that camera up and see what you think. Anyway, just a chatty show this week. rather than having lots of pictures and samples. I do want to go over some things with the Fujifilm autofocus, but I'll leave that till next week. I found a feature that I've overlooked and a lot of people have overlooked, so definitely tune in next week for that, and it could make quite the difference. And I'm going to test it out this week to see how good it is. Could make quite the difference in portrait photography and subject detection and how the camera works with that. So if you enjoyed the video and you got value out of it, do remember to like and subscribe to the channel. It always helps. And we're getting so close to 1,000 subscribers. So thank you to all those who have subscribed. And because I'm putting regular video out, our view hours are going up. And if it keeps going the way it is, we could be looking at 1,000 subscribers and actually getting monetized in the space of a month or so. And that makes a huge difference to the channel. Because it means as soon as I'm monetized and I'm a bigger channel and I'm over 1,000 subscribers, I'm able to sort of, work with vendors more easily and potentially show you reviews of different products that I wouldn't necessarily be able to get, because all the reviews I do are at my cost at the minute. I buy the stuff, whereas sometimes you might get something, you might get something loaned to you for a month rather than a couple of days. Because even when you borrow stuff, you often have to hire it, or you get it for only 2-3 days, which is not enough to test it. But if somebody says you can have a tripod for 3 months and then send it back to us, great. But it just lets me bring more content to you that might be of benefit. Anyway, I digress. I will catch you all later, folks. Thanks for listening if you're still here at the end, and I will catch you all later. Bye.